hello, or ni hao, as we say in China. Today's episode, or let me recap, I'm Professor Zach, and welcome to today's episode of Zachipedia. Today we're going to discuss the Chinese Civil War. Now, unlike the previous wars we discussed, like the Falklands War or the invasion of Grenada, the Chinese Civil War is diverse in a way, because you probably haven't just not heard of it, but you don't even know its plot. Well, in this episode, I'm going to tell you all about the plot, the behind the scenes or the background information on the Chinese Civil War, how it was fought, and why. Now, let's start with some of the background information. Well, in 1906, the Chinese Empire, or Qin, officially became dissolved, and all of its lands split up, and the mainland of Qin became known as China, for Qin was named after the ancient emperor about 2,000 years ago, who they thought led to the almost demise of the civilization. Why? Well, China, believe it or not, was still a dynasty, as it had been for over 2,000 years now. Most people thought the dynasty and the empire just wasn't working, and that it was too old for this day and age. And they also believed that basically the dynasties, or basically the way it was ruling, was just falling. Nothing was working, and that they just needed a change. So of course, nearby superpowers like the US and the Russian Empire managed to come in and form modern day, or back then as they presumed it, modern day China, which was a capitalist democracy with a market economy. Now, China remained like this for 12 years, until in 1918, a political activist and Marxist named Xiao Dao convinced the Chinese government to convert to communism. Why? Well, right now, after about 12 years of capitalism, the economic system was just falling, and everyone was jobless, and there was a famine. So, of course, everyone was starving. People were begging the government to do something about it, but they couldn't, because the capitalist government was holding them back. And the US, who basically founded this, didn't help, because they were in the middle of World War I, which also destroyed China nearly. So the government basically had no problem signing off to communism. Of course, though, people like the US weren't very happy about that. But, as I said, they're in the middle of World War I, so there's nothing they can do. Yet. Now, though, after this, some of the side effects of communism began to form. One, the Great Depression swept through China, since the foreign aid basically came in. Hence, most communist countries need foreign aid to survive. Now, because of this, the economic system went downfall again, probably even worse than when it was capitalist. And in 1929, the dictator Mao Zedong took power. Now, some people, though, still like this, thought that capitalism was even worse, and that it would make it even worse, and that Zedong wasn't that bad of a guy. He was only becoming a dictator for the only good people of the Chinese. But the real citizens of the People's Republic of China, or a group called the Nationalists, they didn't think so. They were founded right after World War II, so that really destroyed China after Japanese rule there. They believed that they wanted to convert back to capitalism, and that was better, and that it was the reason why capitalism just wasn't working was because of its leaders. If they had a new leader and they wanted to kick Zedong out, everything would go away, and everything would be new and prosperous. However, most loyalists, or the communists, didn't want that. They wanted it to stay, like I said before. At first, the nationalists, who were ruled by a man named Kosef Selu-an, basically were more peaceful. They did peaceful rallies and protests, only with signs, and Zedong himself basically just did speeches, trying to motivate loyalists to convert. Fortunately, though, the Chinese government wasn't very happy about this, especially Zedong. Zedong immediately sent troops in to try to end this, and he actually did warn them, though. He said, I want you to stop this. or else we're going to have to decimate you. Well, of course they didn't, and the authorities went in 1948 and basically began attacking them. The nationalists replied by doing more violent scaling. Unfortunately, they had to start fighting back the police, throwing tear gas, and other horrible things. They also, though, started doing something very good. They started forming anti-communist camps in the countryside of China. They had most in rural areas, like I just said, and they had very few in urban areas, since most of Zedong's communist rule was there. And you'd think that the people like the U.S. would support this, but actually no. The U.S. never even came in. They only started sending aid and basically help or supplies till later in the war. How did the war begin, though? Well, the war officially began when nationalist assassins assassinated a man named Ailo Kuntuji, who was the prime minister and basically right-hand man of Zedong, who made an anti-communist speech. After that, Zedong said, you know what, you're going too far, and he declared war on the Nationalist Party. Now, since the nationalists were powerful, though, Zedong's armies were way bigger, and they outgunned the basically nationalists. They even used chemical weapons, heavy artillery, sword, anything they could get their hands on, and started brutally killing and torturing nationalists. And of course, the nationalists started losing after this. But about a month later in the war, most people thought the loyalists would immediately win. Something happened that made the nationalists start to raise up and even began to start beating, possibly even start beating, the communists. How? Well, some of the loyalists saw how badly Zedong was fighting against them, thought he was now the bad guy, and that since his communist rule and all, supported violence, and he was brutally killing these poor nationalists who just had an idea. So the loyalists started converting, or some loyalists started converting to nationalism and fighting for the nationalists. Also, the U.S. in October finally began giving support and aid to the nationalists and started help found some anti-communist bases and camps all around the urban areas. Also, some other nearby capitalist nations such as Nepal and India and Tibet started helping them and supporting the nationalists, not with troops, but with foreign aid and with support and speeches for them. Why? Well, as they were capitalist, most of China was communist, especially the most powerful nation in there. China was capitalist itself. So they were afraid that those nations might come in and do the same thing they were doing to the nationalists, trying to convert them to communism, but with brutality. So they thought the nationalists would fight off the Chinese for them if they helped them with aid, and then that might end the communist rule in Asia, which was their dream. Now, after about months of doing this, it seemed, though, as if that the communists were losing, and the nationalists might win. Fortunately, something bad happened. Proud China finally took some initiative and asked for help from the powerful Mongolia and Soviet Union, who were both extremely powerful communist nations. Now, of course, they didn't just aid them with weaponry and heavy artillery and chemical weapons, which they did also, but they sent in heavy troops, which immediately started outnumbering and outgunning the nationalists again, and pushing them far off their land. But the big turning point was in February of 1949, the Battle of Huaihai took place, which was the last and most famous battle in the Chinese Civil War. Well, what I didn't mention is that the communist camps were extremely sacred, but their headquarters was so sacred that even some low-ranked capitalist nationalists, didn't even know where it was. It was where the leader, Sei Luang, and some of his inner circle kept. However, Zedong, instead of just sending all the forces there, which would end up being a clash against the nationalists and the communists, he ended up doing something a little different. He sent a small squadron all the way to Huaihai anti-communist camp. The nationalists started fighting them off, and to protect their base, they hired all of the nationalists from all the other anti-Marxist coups, which was basically most of them, out of their Marxist coups to fight in Huaihai. Now, even though they easily defeated that squadron, then Zedong sent hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops out of the circles from the outside and went in, so they're basically coming into Huaihai and taking the communist camps, destroying all of the other communist camps. So when they came to Huaihai, that was the last one. And they were extremely outnumbered. However, they never surrendered. The nationalists kept saying, "We know we will lose, but we will lose honorably." And they continued to fight for their nation and for their rights. Fortunately, they were all slaughtered brutally in the end, which immediately began the dissolving of the Nationalist Party, which meant the communists won and China prevailed as communist. Now, even though China is still a communist nation today, some things have changed that have made it a little less lenient. In a way, you could say that the nationalists did win. Well, for one thing, Zedong ruled as dictator until his death in 76. However, or in 1976, not at age 76. However, though, after him, there were no more dictators. They were all, you could say, better, more democratic presidents. And also, China has more converted to a market economy almost for business. But they haven't completely converted because they're still proud of their communist rule. Well, I hope that this video taught you all about, and a lot, about the Chinese Civil War, why it happened, why they fought it, and who fought it. So, going to have to say 再见 or goodbye.